What would you do if your company receives an FDA Form 483 today? You have only 15 days to respond, and your reply can decide the regulatory outcome. Hello, and welcome back to Pharma Health Insights. Do you know that this month FDA has issued new draft guidance on how to respond effectively? I have also included a free download link of this guideline in the video description. So let us understand what it means for pharma professionals. Let us start with a scenario that is very common in the pharmaceutical industry. Imagine that an FDA inspection team arrives at your manufacturing facility. The inspection may last several days or even weeks depending on the scope. During this time, the inspectors review many aspects of the company's operations. They evaluate batch manufacturing records, laboratory test data, deviation reports, cleaning validation studies, environmental monitoring results, and training records. They also inspect the manufacturing areas, warehouses, and laboratories to verify that operations follow documented procedures. At the end of the inspection, the investigators conduct a closing meeting with the management team. During this meeting, they present a document called Form FDA 483. This document lists the observations that the inspectors believe may represent deviations from the regulatory requirements. Receiving this documentation marks the beginning of a critical process for the company. The response to the FDA Form 483 is extremely important. In many cases, the quality of the response determines whether the issue stops at the observation level or escalates into serious regulatory consequences. A well prepared response demonstrates that the company understands the observations, has conducted a thorough investigation, and is implemented effective corrective and preventive actions. This shows regulators that the company has a strong quality management system and is committed to compliance. However, if the response is vague, incomplete, or poorly structured, FDA reviewers may conclude that the company does not fully understand the problem. In such situations, the agency may decide that further regulatory action is necessary. Therefore, the Form 483 response should always be treated as a critical regulatory communication. Before we start, let's understand what is Form 483. Form 483 is issued when FDA investigators observe conditions during an inspection that may indicate deviations from the CGMP requirements. These observations may involve manufacturing processes, documentation practices, laboratory controls, equipment maintenance, or facility conditions. However, it is important to remember that Form 483 represents the investigator's observations, not the final decision of the agency. The company has the opportunity to review the observations and provide a written response explaining how the issues will be addressed. This response allows the FDA to evaluate whether the company has taken appropriate corrective actions. Therefore, Form 483 should be viewed as an opportunity for the company to demonstrate its commitment to quality and compliance. To understand the importance of a Form 483 response, it is helpful to see the bigger regulatory picture. After an FDA inspection, if the investigators observe potential violations, they issue Form 483 observations. The company then prepares and submits a written response addressing these observations. FDA reviewers carefully evaluate the response to determine whether the company has adequately addressed the concerns. If the response demonstrates that the issues have been properly investigated and corrected, the agency may decide that no further action is required. However, if the response is weak or the issues appear systemic, FDA may issue a warning letter now. In more serious situations, enforcement actions such as import alerts or product seizures may occur. Across the pharmaceutical industry, certain types of observations appear frequently during the inspections. One common observation relates to weak deviation investigations, where the root cause analysis is incomplete. Another major concern is data integrity, where laboratory data may not be properly controlled or documented. Documentation deficiencies are also very common. These may include incomplete batch records or missing signatures. Cleaning validation failures can create cross contamination risks that are taken very seriously by the regulators. Finally, the CAPA systems are often cited when corrective actions are implemented but preventive actions are missing. Understanding these common observations helps companies strengthen their quality systems and reduce the regulatory risk. Over the years, analysis of FDA inspection reports has shown that certain types of observations occur repeatedly across pharmaceutical companies. One of the most common is inadequate investigations, where deviations are documented but the root cause is not clearly identified. Data integrity issues also appear frequently when laboratory data is not properly controlled or traceable. Poor documentation practices can lead to incomplete or inconsistent batch records. Environmental monitoring programs sometimes fail to detect contamination risks. Equipment maintenance issues may occur when calibration or servicing is not properly documented. Training deficiencies can lead to errors during manufacturing or testing. By understanding these patterns, companies can proactively strengthen their systems before the inspections occur. One of the most critical aspects of responding to Form 483 observations is the timeline. FDA recommends that companies submit their written response within 15 business days after receiving the Form 483. If the response is submitted within this time frame, FDA reviewers usually evaluate the response before deciding whether further regulatory action is necessary. However, if the response arrives late, the agency may proceed with enforcement actions without considering the company's explanation. This means companies must begin their investigation process immediately after the inspection concludes. Coordination between quality, manufacturing, and regulatory teams is essential to meet this deadline. Now that we understand the timeline for responding to Form 483 observations, the next important question is, what exactly do FDA reviewers expect when they evaluate a company's response? When regulators read a response, they are not just looking for explanations, they are trying to determine whether the company truly understands the issue and whether effective corrective actions are being implemented. Now that we understand the timeline for responding to Form 483 observations, the next important question is, when FDA reviewers evaluate a Form 483 response, they typically focus on several key questions. First, does the company clearly understand the issue identified during the inspection? Second, has the company conducted a thorough investigation and identified the root cause of the problem? Third, are the corrective actions scientifically justified and realistic? Fourth, will these actions prevent the issue from occurring again in the future? Finally, is senior management actively involved in the remediation process? If the response clearly answers these questions, regulators are more likely to consider it satisfactory. A well structured response begins with basic information about the establishment submitting the response. This includes the company name, address, and the FDA establishment identification number. The response should also include a copy of the Form 483 so that each observation can be addressed individually. Another important element is identifying the person who prepared the response. Sometimes companies engage external regulatory consultants to assist with the investigation and remediation strategy. Finally, the response should be signed by someone from executive management who has the authority to allocate resources and implement the corrective actions. Before developing corrective actions, the company must conduct a thorough risk assessment. This assessment evaluates whether the issue identified during the inspection could affect product quality or patient safety. For example, if an observation relates to inadequate cleaning procedures, the company must determine whether previously manufactured batches could be affected by contamination. This may involve reviewing batch records, testing retained samples, or evaluating the stability data. If complaints have been received for the product, these should also be reviewed. The objective is to determine whether any additional actions such as product recalls or enhanced monitoring are required. Once the risk assessment is completed, the next major step is conducting a thorough investigation. The FDA expects the companies to demonstrate that they have carefully evaluated the issue rather than simply reacting to it. The investigation should begin by defining the scope of the investigation. This means determining which products, batches, processes, and equipment could potentially be affected by the issue. Next, relevant documentation must be reviewed. This may include batch manufacturing records, deviation reports, laboratory test results, equipment logbook, and the SOPs. This investigation must be systematic and scientifically justified. Personal interviews can also provide valuable insights. Sometimes the people directly involved in the process can explain operational challenges that may not be visible in the documentation. Finally, historical data should be analyzed. Trend analysis can help determine whether the issue is an isolated incident or part of a larger systemic problem. A well designed investigation demonstrates to regulators that the company is approaching the issue with scientific rigor and seriousness. Root cause analysis is often the most critical step in the entire investigation process. Many companies make the mistake of stopping their investigation at the most obvious explanation. For example, if a deviation occurs during manufacturing, the investigation may simply conclude that the issue was due to operator error. However, regulators expect companies to go deeper than this. The investigation should determine why the operator made the error. Was the procedure unclear or poorly written? Was the operator adequately trained? Was the equipment difficult to operate or poorly designed? Were there environmental factors such as time pressure or inadequate supervision? By examining these underlying factors, the company can identify systemic improvements that prevent recurrence of the problem. Root cause analysis should focus on improving the system rather than assigning the blame. Once the investigation has identified the root cause of the issue, the next step is to implement corrective and preventive actions. These actions form the CAPA plan. CAPA is one of the most important components of a quality management system because it ensures that problems are corrected and prevented from recurring. Without effective CAPA, the issues may continue to appear during future inspections. Let us now look at how a strong CAPA plan should be developed. Corrective actions address the immediate problem identified during the investigation. For example, if an investigation reveals that a procedure was unclear, the corrective action may involve revising the procedure and retraining the personnel. Preventive actions go one step further by addressing systemic issues that could lead to similar problems in the future. For instance, the company may introduce additional process monitoring or modify equipment design. A well developed CAPA plan should clearly define who is responsible for each action and when it will be completed. Regulators expect CAPA plans to be realistic and achievable. Over-promising timelines or committing to actions that cannot be implemented may damage the company's credibility with the regulators. Implementing CAPA actions is only the beginning. FDA also expects companies to verify that these actions are actually effective. This means evaluating whether the corrective actions have resolved the problem and whether preventive measures are working as intended. Effectiveness checks may include monitoring process performance indicators, reviewing trend data, or conducting internal audits. For example, if a deviation occurred due to inadequate cleaning procedures, the company may monitor cleaning verification results for several batches after implementing corrective actions. If the effectiveness evaluation shows that the problem still persists, the investigation may need to be revisited and additional actions may be required. Regulatory guidance emphasizes that management plays a very critical role in ensuring the compliance. Senior leadership must allocate adequate resources for investigation and the corrective actions. This may include assigning experienced personnel, investing in facility upgrades, or engaging external consultants wherever necessary. Management should also monitor the progress of CAPA implementation and ensure that the commitments made to regulators are fulfilled in a timely manner. Most importantly, leadership must promote a culture where quality and compliance are prioritized at every level of the organization. Without strong management involvement, quality systems cannot function effectively. Sometimes it happens companies may disagree with certain observations made during an inspection. In such cases, the response should clearly present the company's scientific or technical reasoning. This may involve providing validation data, analytical results, or regulatory references that support the company's position. However, disagreement should always be handled respectfully and professionally. The objective is not to argue with the regulators, but to present evidence that allows them to evaluate the issue objectively. Clear communication and transparency help build trust between regulators and the company. Many companies make mistakes when preparing their responses to Form 483 observations. One of the most common mistakes is providing vague responses without sufficient detail or supporting evidence. Another frequent issue is weak root cause analysis, where the investigation fails to identify the real cause of the problem. Some responses promise corrective actions but do not provide clear timelines or responsibilities. Incomplete CAPA plans may also create regulatory concerns. Avoiding these mistakes is essential for maintaining regulatory confidence. Let us consider a real example of a weak response from the pharmaceutical industry. During an inspection, FDA investigators observed that a deviation investigation was poorly conducted. The company concluded that the issue was due to operator error without examining other possible causes. The investigation did not review training records, procedures, or equipment design. FDA concluded that the investigation was inadequate and issued a warning letter. This example shows how superficial root cause analysis can escalate regulatory risk. Now let us look at an example where the company handled the situation effectively. An inspection identified deficiencies in the cleaning validation procedures. The company conducted a comprehensive investigation covering multiple products and equipment. They performed a risk assessment to evaluate whether previously manufactured batches could have been affected. Procedures were updated, personnel were retrained, and monitoring systems were enhanced. Because the response demonstrated strong corrective actions and scientific reasoning, the issue was resolved without further regulatory escalation. Ultimately, friends, preventing the inspection observations require building a strong quality culture within the organization. Not only the employees must feel responsible for maintaining product quality and patient safety. Issues should be reported openly without the fear of blame. Continuous improvement should be encouraged through training and internal audits. Management must support these efforts by providing resources and leadership. A strong quality culture helps identify and correct problems before they become regulatory issues. For pharmaceutical professionals, several practical lessons can be learned from regulatory guidance and the industry experience. Investigation should begin immediately after receiving the Form 483. Experienced quality professionals should be involved in analyzing the observations and developing corrective actions. Documentation should be thorough and well organized. Most importantly, companies should focus on building systems that prevents issues rather than simply reacting to inspection findings. Prevention is always more effective than the remediation. The FDA guidance emphasizes several important principles when responding to inspection observations. First and foremost, the company should respond promptly within the recommended timeline. Second, investigations must be thorough and scientifically justified. Third, the root cause of the problem must be clearly identified. Finally, corrective and preventive actions must be implemented effectively and verified through regular monitoring. Following these principles helps companies maintain regulatory compliance and protect the patient safety. To summarize our discussion, receiving an FDA Form 483 does not automatically means a regulatory enforcement. However, the response prepared by the company plays a crucial role in determining the outcome. Companies must respond within the recommended time frame and conduct very thorough investigations. Corrective and preventive actions should be well planned and verified for effectiveness. A strong response demonstrates commitment to quality and regulatory compliance. Compliance with regulatory requirements is not just about avoiding enforcement actions. It is about ensuring that medicines reaching patients are safe, effective, and of high quality. Strong compliance systems help companies maintain product reliability and build trust with regulators. They also support sustainable operations by reducing the risk of recalls, import alerts, and production disruptions. Ultimately, compliance protects both patients and the reputation of the pharmaceutical industry. The inspection observations should not be viewed only as a regulatory challenge. They also represent opportunities for further improvements. By carefully analyzing inspection findings and implementing effective corrective actions, companies can strengthen their quality systems and prevent future issues. Continuous improvement is a core principle of pharmaceutical quality management. Organizations that embrace this mindset are better prepared for the inspections and better equipped to protect patient safety. Thank you for joining this session. I hope this discussion has helped clarify how pharmaceutical companies should respond to FDA Form 483 observations. Understanding this process is important for professionals who are working in quality, manufacturing, and the regulatory roles. You should always demonstrate commitment to compliance and patient protection through effective responses. If you found this session useful, please share it with colleagues who may benefit from this information. Thank you once again for your time and attention. If you would like to continue learning about the pharmaceutical quality systems, regulatory compliance, and industry practices, please stay connected with Pharma Health Insights with Rajesh. Through this platform, we aim to simplify complex regulatory concepts and share practical insights that help professionals succeed in the pharmaceutical industry.